Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Greetings. Hi, Henry. Hello, Searles.
Thank God Tyler is here.
I'm here.
Mr. Roberts is here. Hello.
Hi, Coach.
There you go.
See, Quinn is here.
I don't think Quinn ever leaves.
Never. I'm always around.
Mr. Kepner, I see.
Yep.
Here.
Amy, hi.
Ted Wood is here.
Hey, Kendall. Hey, Peter.
Hey, Allison.
Hey, how you doing? Where's Ted? Let's see, Ted asked a
Ted's
really,
waving.
hey.
Hello.
I mean, he really asked a very astonishingly complex question that I received, and am going to quote him. Well done, Ted.
I didn't say I could answer it.
What?
I didn't say I could answer it.
Well, that's why you're asking it.
Exactly.
All right.
Z Berm's here.
Okay.
All right, good evening. Looking forward to it.
Oh, there he is. It's my man. You growing a beard? Or are you just looking sort of like chic?
I'm here excited to hear Tyler.
Okay.
Don't fall for the bait. Hello, Tim.
This man. This man.
There's the unmute. Hi.
Hey, there he is.
Hey, Plies.
Hey, Mr. Kepner, how are you?
How you doing, man?
Good. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Hey, are you going to keep an eye on the Mets game at the same time here?
No, I am not.
I don't have a choice.
I have, no, don't do that, because if they fall behind, then it's just gonna screw me up.
Oh, I didn't say I
It's
was
gonna
going to give
screw
up.
up the whole flow. So just keep, although I have to say that Kendall and my teams are the beasts of the East. The beasts of the East. You know, it's not much of an East, or as I've seen on one of the Mets blogs, we're the beasts of the least.
You're right. Right.
I'm sure the West Coast holds us in great fear that when we come visiting, that somehow we'll pummel those three top teams in the West.
Well, again, we could very well do that.
I love the fact that it's another week and it's another no-hitter. Didn't we have one last week as well?
I think it's
we had.
I don't know when the next one is scheduled for, but like maybe midweek next week, I guess.
Yeah, it's so funny. You look at like Garrett Cole and DeGrom and Bauer and Greinke and Bieber, and they've never pitched a no-hitter. But
I know.
I doubt many people have heard of Spencer Turnbull before last night. So
I hadn't heard of many of these guys who
right
throwing them.
Yeah, I guess we got 5 so far. The record is 7, so
5, really? Wow.
definitely within reach.
Yeah.
I'm going to call it now, Doc. When Syndergaard comes back, first start.
He's my man. My man.
Another one.
All right,
They'll pull him after 4
a
innings.
table slap for that one, Top Pies.
They'll pull him after 4 innings.
That's fine. 4 innings. No hitter for 4 innings. That makes it all the easier, guys.
That's true. Yes.
Pies, you're not a stinking Mets fan, are you?
Oh,
Pies, you a stinking Mets fan?
All my life.
Oh, my.
Why do
I
you
like-
think we have established the bond that we have?
I'm glad I didn't know that when I was teaching you, Tim.
Well, I had
Well, when I taught him
everybody's
the
jokes all through high school, but that's okay. That's
well, I
okay.
had to suffer the same thing, but I'll tell you one thing, that Tim's grade got a boost.
Oh, I have no doubt
There's
of
no
that.
question.
Don't tell me
Once
that.
it-
I like to think I at least earned one.
Thinking Mets fans always stick together.
Yeah.
Well,
Hey, so should we get started? Because I have a little intro.
I think it's time.
I have a
before there's a civil
heartfelt
war in
intro
here.
to Tyler.
So with great trepidation, well, first of all, greetings. I'm glad you all could make it tonight. I expect a few more will be signing in. This has been, I think, a great experience for me to share space on Zoom with Doc, who hated Zoom until these 4 sessions, and to have Tyler along with us, and he's the capstone of the 4 sessions, and looking forward to what he has to say tonight. So, some great questions have already come through. I'm sure there will be more. This group has really bonded well, and I've loved the interaction that we've had. It was particularly stellar, I think, last week. You're finding your voice. Sorry, it's going to end here. Maybe Doc and I'll come back next year. Who knows? But at this point, this is the Doc and Tyler show. And I'll just make sure that Doc continues to behave himself, which is difficult when you're a stinking Mets fan.
Well, I'll probably end up muting myself. But anyway, I wanted to give a little background on Tyler, some of which you know, if you read the book and looked at the little biog. But there's other stuff that I wanted to mention to you. Baseball literature as a kind of course began with Tyler and Tim Pies, who asked me to do a baseball literature independent study with them. And that was years ago. Were you like juniors, or you remember?
I think it was senior year with Jamie.
Okay.
Triple.
It was senior year.
Okay.
And
And
Jamie
then
was
it, you know, and then it, you know, I did it for several more years and it was just so much fun. And I remember we did some of the really old classics, The Natural, Bang the Drum Slowly, The Southpaw, which is a wonderful book, and others. But it was really an inspiration for the baseball literature course that then I taught for many years, and Tyler was good enough all the time that I taught it to come in and answer questions that the class had for him. And one thing that we really liked about the class was that our academic field trip was a Phillies game. And I always tried to schedule it on a weekday so that we'd miss school.
Nice.
Because it seems if you're going to have a field trip, you should do it during school hours. And the students received credit if they filled out a scorecard. That was a journal entry. So it was a wonderful, with Tim and Tyler, it was a great beginning. And when I taught Tyler in AP English, I still remember, like, you know, I'm reading all of this literary analysis, and then there would be Tyler who would take the creative option and do nonfiction. And that was always like, oh my God, please let me find Tyler's essay, you know, just so that I can get through this. Well, anyway, he went to Vanderbilt on a Grantland Rice and Fred Russell sports writing scholarship, which is très cool. And then began his career covering the Angels for the Press Enterprise, then the Mariners for Seattle, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, and then the New York Times. And he began as the beat reporter for my beloved Mets. It was a moment for me to find that out.
As soon as I got there, I took him right to the World Series, Doc.
I know that.
Yep.
I'm very aware
was
of
the
that.
magic ingredient. Right.
Now, am I right that the Times job somehow had a Buster Olney connection?
Oh yeah. Well, so Buster went to Vanderbilt, and when I was doing my baseball magazine back in the GA days, I used to go whenever I would concentrate more on the visiting teams because they were only in town for 3 days. I can get the Phillies whenever I want. And so I always loved when San Diego would come in because Tony Gwynn was a great player, but also a tremendous guy. Always gave you time, interesting, engaging. So the first summer after I started at Vandy, it was my last year doing the magazine, I was wearing a Vanderbilt shirt. And then Tony just noticed it and said, our beat writer went to Vanderbilt also. His name is Buster Olney. You got to meet him. So Tony went up and found Buster wherever he was in the clubhouse and brought him down to me. And Buster and I, became good friends. And he became like a mentor to me, and he would like look out for me. And so 4 years later, when I was out of college, he told his sports editor at the Times, Buster had moved on from San Diego to Baltimore to the New York Times. And he said, hey, there's a kid out in California covering the Angels. Maybe he has a future here. Why don't you check him out? And so I would just start to, have coffee or just whatever with the Times sports editor before there was even a job. And then I got the job. So in 2000, January 2000. So yeah, Tony Gwynn playing matchmaker with me and Buster Olney really helped out.
And when Tyler was the beat reporter for the Mets, I would come down several with my son Brendan, several spring trainings, and Tyler would be good enough to host us there. I had a lot of rehabilitation for my son because his favorite player was Chipper Jones. And I kind of thought, what have I created, like a seed here or something? But anyway, Tyler introduced both of us to a lot of, to a lot of folks on the Mets. And fortunately, he hadn't arrived at Nick's Tomato Pie, where we have dinner several times, and didn't have to witness my congratulating the very good left-hander Al Leiter for a good performance that day.
Nice.
And he's looking like, who the hell is this guy telling me that I pitched? And but anyway, there were a couple of moments, and I have to say, if teachers gain any kind of immortality, it's not through our salaries or our prestige, it's through our former students. And one of the greatest moments in I thank Tyler for this, is that he was introducing me to Steve Phillips, who was the GM of the Mets, and he said, okay, I want you to meet this guy. He's the one who taught me how to write. And that's still, I'll never forget that. I will never forget. So thank you for that. And it also turned out, I was telling Tyler the other day, the favorite player that we met who remembered my son each year was Turk Wendell, who some of you remember from the Phillies. And he, I think the last time we went up there, before Tyler went to cover the satanic team, the Yankees, the last year, Turk Wendell gave my son some kind of tooth from one of the animals he killed, and Wendell was a character. If you don't know who he is, just look him up. He was a total character. Of course, now he's the national baseball writer for the Times. And well, so I'm proud of him, for God's sakes. What else? So what I would like to do, you guys, many of you sent some very, very good questions. So you'll be glad to know that I'm going to shut up as much as possible. And I'll read the questions. And if other questions arise, but I want to give first dibs to the folks who did, who corresponded and sent questions. And I'm also going to, I'm going to read you a poem, and then we'll get on to the questions. But it begins, I was inspired to read the poem because of Ted Wood's question, which is very esoteric. And I'll give you a little time to think about this one, Tyler. At its core, is baseball more poetics trying to be defined by science, or is it science being defined poetically? How has that changed through history? Now, one of the first pieces I teach or I taught in baseball literature was a poem by Robert Francis, which is called Pitcher. So I'll read it slowly so you can catch on, but I think it answers or it responds to Ted's question. His art is eccentricity. His aim, how not to hit the mark he seems to aim at. His passion, how to avoid the obvious. His technique, how to vary the avoidance. The others throw to be comprehended. He throws to be a moment misunderstood. Yet not too much, not errant, wild, but every seeming aberration willed. Not to, yet still to communicate, making the batter understand too late. Now, this is a humongoid metaphor, okay? And I'd be asking you the question, but the idea is the pitcher is being compared here to a poet. And the others who throw to be comprehended are, of course, all of the other players on the field. But the pitcher wants to fool. So that's a little lead in to Ted's question. And I'll repeat it briefly. At its core is baseball more poetics, trying to be defined by science, or is it science being defined poetically? And how has that changed? So Tyler, it's up to you.
Tyler just disappeared.
And he disappeared.
All right, Tyler disappeared and muted himself. This is not what I was counting on.
No, sorry. The dryer was going and it was loud. So, but you know what? That was a great poem. I wish I had remembered that. You know, because the book didn't have a little quote at the beginning. What do they call it? Epigraph or something. And I was looking for like the perfect one. I couldn't quite find it. I didn't want to force it, but that would have been a good one. A moment misunderstood. I like that a lot.
If you would just asked me.
Yeah, no. But I mean, I think particularly now with such an you know, emphasis on analytics and all the numbers, it feels like it's you know, it's poetry. What was it? Poetry trying to define science?
Yeah, or science trying to define science being defined poetically.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it is, because it's you know, you can put everything on the field into everything in baseball except for this new ghost runner on second base thing can be put into a category of how did you earn that spot on the base? How did that guy go to that base? What, you know, accounting, everything's all accounted so perfectly. And so I think that would be the scientific part, and then the poetic part is what you're trying to use to define it.
Good. By the way, the rest of you can just chirp in. You know, just start talking, okay? And because I'm technologically totally inept, some things don't change. Mm-hmm. I don't have to let you on, or in fact, I wouldn't even know how to let you on. Okay, so just talk. So let's go to another question. At the end of the fastball chapter, you discuss how fastballs seem to be the primary focus for pitchers these days, which is slowing down the game in terms of on-field movement. And I think it's also because of the strikeouts. How do you think the game will be affected long-term if this trend continues? Are up-and-coming pitching hopefuls doing serious work on other pitches anymore?
Well, it's funny. I just wrote about that just now in a story for tomorrow or Friday or whenever. And it's, you know, pitchers are throwing harder than ever, or at least harder than they've ever been recorded. But they've started using using the fastball less often. It's only about 50% now,
Mm.
whereas 20 years ago it was probably 60, 65%. I think what you're seeing is, these guys throw so hard, but they're also increasingly able to use technology to design these off-speed pitches, these breaking pitches. They can see the 10,000 frames per second, exactly what their hand does, exactly how they're supposed to move it. And it's still tough to repeat it. I mean, that's the essence of athleticism, is being able to repeat the same, the same movements. But there's such a specificity now to exactly which pitches work best for each guy. So that's as big a reason, I think, as velocity with all the strikeouts, is that guys can tailor their repertoire almost in the lab. These teams have these pitching labs at spring training or wherever. They can tailor their repertoire specifically to what they do best. It's not just like a coach saying, "I think you got a great curveball, you should use it more." Like, they can scientifically see, and they're much more prone now to sort of just, hey, if my slider is my best pitch, the one that's hardest to hit, I'll throw that a ton. I might throw that more, because if you can land it for strikes consistently, it's sort of a different mentality than you've got to establish number one. So that's happened really in the last, that's really taken off the last 3-4 years, almost since the book has come out. But it is still true that, the faster they throw, the faster everything else, the harder it is to hit. Guys can still catch velocity if it's straight, but if it's got a little tail or a cut on it, it leads to a lot of foul balls, a lot of, mishit balls. And so pitch counts rise, pitchers get tired, they got to bring in relievers, and these games go on longer because of high pitch counts for walks and relief, and pitching changes. I'm sure when Robin Sr. was pitching, he'd pitch complete games in 300 innings and probably pitch a lot of complete games in less than 100 pitches, and those games would go. But I would guess that there were not as many foul balls, and there's not as much picking around the zone as there was back then.
But I think, Tyler, a lot of your Hall of Fame pitchers from the 40s, 50s, and 60s were all fastball pitchers. They were not. They didn't trick anybody. They, showed them the ball and said, "Here, hit it if you can." And I think that your fastball was your dominant. When Don Newcomb and my dad would hook up in the early 50s in the game, there couldn't have been a dozen off-speed pitches, thrown. I mean, it was just hit it if you can.
Right.
And it was dominated. If you had the good fastball, you were successful. Mm-hmm. If you didn't, then you were not.
And I think it was much more rare back then to have a really good fastball. Now they have such an inventory of these usually young relief pitchers they can bring up and throw them for one inning at a time. They're not always successful, as the Phillies bullpen saw last year, but a lot of times you see these games where it's just one inning pitcher after another throwing heat, and with one off-speed pitch you can keep the guys guessing. So whereas Robin Roberts had a great fastball, and you could tell Ferguson Jenkins, hey, when he was with the Cubs, use that fastball. Guys don't want to get behind the count. They'll swing early, but make them hit your pitch. The two-seam sinker or the four. And let Fergie and Robin Roberts would win 20 games and go 300 innings multiple years in a row. By being aggressive and having a great fastball and using it right.
Well, the other thing I don't think that you see happen a lot today is I got to play golf with Pee Wee Reese back in the 80s, and it was such a thrill because here was somebody that played against my dad in his prime. And I remember my dad with the Orioles when he was at the end of his career, but this is his prime. And he said that the thing about the pitchers back then was that they could change. I mean, with nobody on, nobody out, they laid it in there. Go ahead, see how far you can hit it. Mm-hmm. But if there was a man on third and 2 outs, Pee Wee Reese said that my dad was unhittable with a man on third and 2 outs. He just had that extra ability to reach back, and I don't see that anymore. Everybody throws it exactly the same, and they can get time.
And you know who else had that? And he would ascribe it directly to your father, because he was, I think, his roommate when he was a very young pitcher with the Orioles was Jim Palmer.
Yeah.
And Jim Palmer gets, I mean, obviously he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the greatest ever, but his advanced stats are not as good as you might think, because he didn't have a ton of strikeouts. And Jim, I've gotten to know him pretty well, will always say, like, yeah, because, you know, I would challenge guys, and then if I got in trouble, then I would start to, you know, I would keep him there. I'd keep him on base. He pitched differently. You could raise your fastball. You could, you know, instead of going 80%, you might go 90%, whatever, however pitchers did it. Palmer had a way of making the big pitch when he needed to. And he always talks about how much he learned from Robin Roberts when he was just starting out, and Robin was, you know, was a veteran.
I remember one thing Palmer told me was that my dad advice, he said that, what do you do? He used to call my dad old man. He says, what do you do on 0-2? And my dad said, well, you try to get 0-3. Today, he said, well, you got to nibble. You can't give him anything to hit. You can't get beaten on an 0-2 pitch. You know, my dad said, go to 0-3. But that was a different game now. I mean, oh, my God. My dad would never survive with the analytics today. He just he could hear the fastball and then a little nickel curve, and that was it.
I think Jacob deGrom does as good a job as any pitcher now in terms of that control. Like, in other words, when he gets batters on base and there are 2 outs, he's very good at it. It's just like a machine.
Oh, stop it, Doc.
I was going to say, Doc, are we biased on that? Because I agree with you, but, you know.
I'm sorry. I'm just talking about the best pitch in baseball. Just sorry.
Turk Wendell in the Hall of Fame before the day's over.
What's that?
So you're going to have Turk Wendell being
I'm sorry. No, I didn't say that. I just said Jake's the best. Okay.
Turk deserves to go just for the necklace.
Toothbrushing is pretty good too.
Yes, for those of you who don't know, Turk Wendell would eat licorice in the dugout between innings and then brush his teeth in the dugout. And he had a lot of other quirks that were really pretty funny. Yeah. So here's a question that I think it's just sort of shifting a little bit, but what did you find to be the biggest challenges and or disappointments as you were working on the book?
I guess the biggest challenges were probably getting guys to talk about, like, the spitballs and the you know, the scuff balls and all that. You know, fortunately, I was able to get a couple of catchers and a couple of you know, former players who were broadcasters to kind of, like, you know, anonymously, you know, just tell me how guys do it and what some of the techniques are. But also, you know, some of this stuff is it happened so long ago that I would always feel apologetic about it, but the player were like, it's all right, just ask me. Like Rick Honeycutt, when he was a young pitcher 41 years ago, you know, got caught with a thumbtack in his glove in his last start of the season because he had a really bad second half, and he was like, I'll just try something else. I'm facing the Royals. They're great. That was the year they went on to the World Series with the Phillies. So I'm like, Rick, you know, he was pitching coach for the Dodgers for a long time. Like, I know you've done a ton in the game in the last 35 years. I hate to bring up something bad from the past, but I got to ask you. He's like, all right. Yeah, what do you want to know? So he was doing. I mean, it's part of guys' stories for the most part. You know, and I found it's just basically finding connections. Like I knew someone who could vouch for me with another guy who got caught with sandpaper, Brian Moeller, and you know, and he was good. So really, I mean, it wasn't, you know, Taylor Perry didn't want to talk, but then he was right, like the day I had started to write that chapter, he was on some conference call for some golf tournament, some celebrity golf tournament. And so I just jumped in on that and, like, asked 3 questions there and you know, sort of had him cornered. And so I kind of pulled a fast one on old Gaylord in order to get him in my book there.
All right.
but almost everybody was happy to talk. And you know, you have to be persistent sometimes and track guys down, but for the most part, I could count on one hand probably the number of people who just didn't want to participate. So
Wow.
I was pretty happy with that.
Wow.
Hey, Doc, why don't you identify the questioner? When you read a question, say who it's from.
Well, I would do that if I remembered.
Oh, okay.
Well, I think this is from the Chadwins. I think so. And this sort of relates to what you just were saying. And the question is, what surprised you as you were gathering information? Like, were there any like real aha moments?
I think what surprised me most maybe was, I mean, you always have little moments of discovery, which are always great. You know, when you talk to guys, you know, I didn't know this or I didn't know that. But it was, I spent several days at the Hall of Fame just going through their archives on everything I could think of. And it's funny, like how often certain topics came up back in the day that are never really brought up anymore. Specifically, like who invented the curveball was like, there's like so much stuff about like guys who, you know, in their obituaries, you know, claim to be the inventor of the curveball. And this guy was a phony because he said he did, but he didn't. And I was throwing it at Harvard with, you know, in 1844. And I was throwing it, you know, with the Brooklyn Excelsiors and, you know, these obscure leagues. So the ownership of the birth of the curveball was a much bigger deal than I ever knew. And also and just like the whole spitball scuffball thing was a much bigger deal. Now you're starting to hear about it more with like guys increasing their spin rates through pine tar and stuff. Again, that's getting more into like the modern technology that's just been exploding the last 5 years. But that whole thing was a big deal, particularly in the 60s and 70s. Like it was sort of just accepted that certain guys were gonna try to do something, and they didn't. Every game was not on TV. They weren't scrutinizing everything. A lot of it was wink, wink. You know, if Whitey Ford, you know, was able to do some trickery on the mound, and the umpires just kind of told him, hey, you know, knock it off, you know, or like go back in. The one was that he had a specially made ring with a little indentation on it, or a little raised part, rasp or whatever, and it was he would like get a ball, and he would, you know, when he'd rub up the ball, he'd you know, rub it against the ring, and you know, so one of the managers called him on it, and so the umpire just sort of waddled out there and said, all right, you know, I'm going to ask you to go into the dugout and you'll tell people you're changing your jock strap. When you come back out, I don't want to see that ring on it. Okay, big guy. You know, like they weren't going to embarrass a guy like Whitey Ford. We're going to dress him down. But if Elston Howard took the ball and scuffed it on his shin guards to give a little extra action on Whitey Ford's pitch, most of the time they would just look the other way. So the suspicions and the sort of acceptance of all that back 50 years ago or so was interesting to me. Because that's stuff I wasn't as aware of. Because I mean, I really became awake about baseball in 1982. So, and ever since then, I've followed it as closely as I possibly could. So, like, for the last 40 years, like, you know, I know about all that stuff. And then most of the stuff in the 70s was still recent enough to where I was pretty well acquainted with it. But when you start getting back before that, that's when a lot of stuff that I just really didn't know about, you know, was out there to find.
Yeah. So here's a sort of a stylistically related question. What inspired the format for the book?
Well, I've been trying to come up with the right idea, because I wanted to have something that I where I could have a long time to do it, and where I would be really passionate about the subject, and I would just want to do it, want to, you know, do something on it every day. So I had first, you know, thought about doing something on that generation of pitchers that just in the last 2-3 years have started to die off, sadly. You know, the Negros and Suttons and, you know, Seaver and Palmer and Carlton, all my guys from back then, the guys who started in the 60s and I caught them at the end in the 80s when they were these like legends of these dinosaurs still roaming the earth. And I was so lucky to get to see them at the end. And so I was like, you know, this great generation, the last generation that would throw 300 innings, the last generation that would, you know, do that sort of thing. But the idea kind of morphed into one that I thought was better, which was just, you know, I could incorporate all of those guys, but I could make the characters instead of the people, I can make them the pitches. And so that's just how we conceived of it is do a chapter on each pitch. I come up with 10, I thought 10 distinct pitches. I couldn't really come up with more that merited their own chapters. And these 10 were, there's enough difference between them. There's a lot of similarities that I tried to acknowledge between certain pitches. You know, a lot of guys, splitter can act like a changeup, or certainly a changeup and a screwball are very similar, stuff like that. But I felt that 10 was pretty good, and I had no idea how to order them. I was going to go with fastball first, but then the editor wanted to put the slider first because it sort of bounced off of the introduction, which had a lot of Steve Carlton in it. It was very personal. So I got right to Steve Carlton, and I wanted to finish up with a cutter because I thought there was a lot of poignant stuff from Halladay in that chapter, and also Rivera being like the closer to close out the book, talking about the cutter. So
yeah, good. Any questions from the rest of you regarding this?
Yeah, I was at Tyler. Did you ever try to or look up anything about Stu Miller?
Oh yeah, he's in the changeup chapter.
Yeah.
I just missed him because he died, but I talked to Palmer actually about Stu Miller's changeup and about facing it.
Palmer, yeah, he was on for 2 years.
Oh, yeah, that change, and I think what I wrote was Mickey Mantle, I think, hit his 500th homer off Stu Miller, but it was one of the few times he ever got much of a hit off him. He hated facing him. And I talked to Bobby Richardson about how that pitch moved, because I had a lot of fun with guys like Stu Miller, because guys who are not in the Hall of Fame, you know, I didn't want to make it just like, here are the greatest Hall of Fame pitchers, because a lot of guys had Hall of Fame caliber pitches. Like, I think you're saying, like Stu Miller's changeup was a Hall of Fame worthy pitch. Now, he didn't have a Hall of Fame career, but he had a very good career. Someone like Mario Soto, who had a changeup, who Mario just was a contemporary of Carlton when I was first watching baseball. It was like Soto had the changeup and Steve Rogers had the sinker, and you know, you had these guys with these one pitch that they were known for. A little bit later, Greg Olson of the Orioles had that curveball. Tom Gordon. So I liked tracking down guys who did one thing. Yeah, they might have had long careers. Like Jerry Royce had a really long career. He threw a great cutter. Jerry Royce isn't in the Hall of Fame, but like, he pitched 22 years and won 200 and some games. And I'd love to talk to him about the cutter, because he was throwing it before other guys were. So yeah, guys like Stu Miller and Jerry Royce and people like that were a lot of fun to get into, because they are people who would be easy to forget about for current readers, because they're not in the Hall of Fame. And you can go to the Hall of Fame and look at plaques and people won't know who Eparixi is, or, you know, or Burley Grimes and stuff. So even if you're in the Hall of Fame, you know, you might not be famous. But I wanted to give credit to a lot of these other guys who don't have plaques, but made a big contribution to
Who's that? Ball.
Who's that? Sorry?
Kenny and his palm ball.
I missed whose palm ball.
Jim Constanti.
Oh, Jim. You know what? I didn't get into him. I did a lot of Phillies. I did a ton of Phillies, I think, but I didn't get into Constanti.
That's a long time ago. I mean, he passed away in the 60s. I mean,
yeah, he didn't live very long. What I find amazing about Constanti is that he was the ace MVP closer, reliever, and he started in the World Series. He pitched 10 innings, I think.
Yeah, well, he didn't pitch 10, but he got beat 1-0.
Yeah, and like it was like Clem Labine of the Brooklyn Dodgers pitched a 10-inning shutout the game after Don Larson's perfect game. and Clem Levine was mostly a reliever. Like, you know, these guys like
Joe Black.
They could call on a relief pitcher to go out and start, and then he would just go 9 innings.
Well, he had started 5 of the last 10 games.
Yeah.
It's Sunday, 10 innings Sunday to clinch the pennant, and the first game was was Wednesday, and he just couldn't do it. He was just dead.
So that's why he pitched game 2, right?
Yeah, so Constanti pitched game 1 and almost, and then my dad got beat 2-1 in 10 innings.
Mm-hmm.
Asio hit a home run. So it's the relievers were not the relief. My dad always says that everybody talks about complete games. He said, if he had Mariano Rivera in the bullpen, he would have gladly given him the ball for the 9th inning. Mm-hmm. He'd have gone in, given Mario the ball, sat in the dugout and enjoyed himself. He said he didn't get that 9th inning pressure and all that stuff, but he wasn't going to give the ball to those guys that were in the Phillies bullpen.
Right.
Because they were in the bullpen because they weren't getting anybody out.
Exactly. Right. It wasn't until, probably Raleigh Fingers and Hoyt Wilhelm, although Hoyt Wilhelm did both, but where Raleigh Fingers was sort of like a full-time reliever. That was what he did. And you could build guys to do that job, because before then it was just sort of like, hey, you're relieving because you're not good enough to start. And Mariano was not good enough to start. And Fingers was not good enough to start. But they might have just 2 pitches and they can dominate with them, like Trevor Hoffman. And there you go. That's what you needed for 1 inning, 2 innings at a time.
Well, the Orioles bullpen did not close games. I mean, you had Dick Hall, Harvey Haddix, Stu Miller, and Hoyt Wilhelm. Mm-hmm. And they just pitched who was Hank Bauer just, well, it's if there was a couple of lefties coming up, they'd have thrown Haddix up there. If a couple of right-handers was up, they'd throw Hall because he was tough on with that herky-jerky motion, tough on right-handers. And Wilhelm was just, you never knew about him because knuckleball is either good or it's not. But
it's either good or it's just sitting there on the tee.
But saves were like earned run average. Nobody had any idea that there was such a stat.
Right.
I wanted to first of all acknowledge the Wetzel brothers for mentioning in a message to me that I had promised I wasn't going to talk much, but there I am talking. So thank you very much, former students, for that. I don't know how many of you have the paperback copy of the of K. I want you to know, Tyler, so that I would not sully the hardback copy that you inscribed to me. I purchased separately at my own expense.
Thank you.
This one, but I have to tell everybody, if you don't have this copy, it's pretty damned amazing the kinds of mini reviews that are there. I mean,
yeah, they added a lot of reviews for the second. That's a big difference.
Oh my God! I mean, Tim McCarver, he's all over it, like white on rice. Oh, I love Tim McCarver. And so many other, Oral Hershiser. Well, Bob Costas, I would expect, because after all, he subscribed to the KP Monthly.
Hershiser is funny, sometimes if you know a guy and they're cool with it, they're like, yeah, I'll endorse your book, just tell me what to say and run it by me and I'll say sure. So I'm like, all right, so I gave Oral a copy of the book, and then I just sort of suggested something that he might say, and he's like, yeah, sure, that sounds like me, go for it. And then he called me months later after he had actually read the book, and he's like, this was great. He's like, I learned so much. I was like, he was raving about it. I'm like, thanks, it's awesome. It would have been better than the 2 lines I gave you to sign off on. But that was actually very rewarding for me, though, that he actually, took the time to read the whole thing and learned from it and liked it a lot. He was really tickled by the Maddox quote where, I talked to Maddox about pitching off that 2-seamer that, with that movement. And he's like, well, I basically did it because I saw Hershiser do it, and I figured I'm similar kind of stuff, so I could do that too. And
I
think that meant a lot. Even though Oral Hershiser was the big dude in his time, he was not, he's not the winningest pitcher alive like Greg Maddox, so I think it was still pretty cool for Hershiser to hear someone like that give him credit.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes.
Sorry, this is Heather. Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
I was just gonna, I'm wondering because you went on a pretty serious press junket, including coming to GA after the book came out, and you were a question on Jeopardy, and you got interviewed on Fresh Air. What came out of that was your favorite? You know, like favorite interview or whatever came out after the book? What'd you enjoy?
That's a great question, and nobody's asked me that. And and the answer would probably surprise you. It was because I was surprised to get the invitation. But Larry King had a show that I don't know what it was even on, but he was not hosting this one particular week, and the guest host was Dennis Miller, who I used to love on Saturday Night Live back in the early 90s. I mean, those were my guys, you know, Phil Hartman and Dana Carvey and Dennis Miller and Jan Hooks and that whole gang. I would, you know, watch and memorize every word. You know, Sunday morning we'd be talking. It was great. And I mean, particularly in the 90s, you know, Dennis Miller's gotten a little too political for me, but I found his humor over the years to just be hilarious. And so I spent, you know, an hour talking baseball with Dennis Miller on this show, his interview show, and he was great. You know, he was dropping in all his references. Like, he really, really knows baseball. I remember he told me, he said, like, he was from Pittsburgh, and he's like asking me where I'm from, and he's like, yeah, I got to admit, when I always thought Pie Traynor was the greatest third baseman of all time, and then I saw this Mike Schmidt cat, and I thought this cat's pretty good too, you know, something like that. Yeah, he would drop, and it was just a thrill for me to be interviewed by Dennis Miller, who I just thought was in a totally different context as a comedian who I enjoyed.
Yeah.
That was really great. The Jeopardy thing came out of nowhere. I had no idea. I was in a press box in Cincinnati, and I started getting text messages about it and Twitter messages and stuff. And that was really cool. Totally unexpected. They didn't run it by me. But that was neat. But I had nothing to do with that. But that, yeah, the Dennis Miller thing, there were a lot of cool stuff, you know, getting to speak at Fenway Park and everything. But the Dennis Miller thing was the best, I think. The biggest surprise, thrill, whatever.
So Tyler, oh, sorry.
I said, did they answer the question? Did they get you in Jeopardy? One of the guys or all of the guys?
He did get it, and it was a daily double, and he bet 3,000 on it, and he got it. So,
well, what was the question? I didn't know anything about this.
It was, I think he said it's on GA's Twitter actually. If you go back, but is a baseball writer, Tyler Kepner, wrote a book about 10 different pitches with this singular letter as its title. And so it was one of those great Jeopardy questions. You don't have to have read or be familiar with the book to guess what a book about pitching that's named for one letter, what letter that might be. It was a perfectly Jeopardy kind of question. But to hear Alex Trebek say it was, yeah, that was neat.
So are you thinking about writing any more?
Any more? Oh yeah, I've been working on a second book for 2 years now, 2.5. No, I guess this is year 3 that I've been working on it. It's all about, I don't have a title for it yet, but it's all about World Series history, and it's all about like another broad topic that I care a lot about, that I can sort of present in my way. You know, I'm not going to do a chronology. You know, in 1916 it was the Red Sox over the Dodgers. In 1917 it was, you know, that put you to sleep by 1909. But so I'm going to have probably 7 chapters on 7 different themes throughout World Series history. You know, one on managing in the World Series, and one on building a World Series team, one on unsung heroes, you know, where I talked to Del Unser, among others, Marty Bystrom. You know, one about handling pressure, where I talked to Mike Schmidt, and Schmidt I felt was the perfect guy to talk to about that topic, because his first World Series he was MVP. His second one he was 1 for 20. So like he has both experiences of being completely locked in and on it, and then being sort of giving into the pressure and trying to do too much and getting in his own head. And it was painful to watch Schmidt in the 83 World Series. He was so much better than that. But he just, he couldn't quite put it together. So he was really good about, how to thrive or give into pressure. Reggie Jackson was great, talking about, raising his game under pressure. So, topics like that are kind of timeless somewhat. And 7 of them, and another section where I just do all kinds of funky lists and fun stuff. So I'm having a lot of fun with it. It's been,
Cool.
I got about 1.5 chapters left to go, and then of course you revise the whole thing and pick out photos and all that fun stuff.
Yeah. So
You're running out of time, but you got to talk to Bobby Shantz. He's 95 now.
Yeah, he
but he's his World Series Game 7 of 1960 might be one of the great stories that people don't remember about the World Series, about his from the 3rd inning to the 8th inning.
Right.
Now he shut down the Pirates and went, and the Yankees took a 3-run lead into the 8th inning, and then they took him out, and Coates came in and blew the game. And
Hal Smith. I talked to Hal Smith just before he died. Hal Smith hit the biggest Hal Smith home run in the bottom of the 8th of Game 7 in 1960 is actually statistically the biggest play in World Series history in terms of giving someone, a team that was really, really unlikely to win, and then making them really, really likely to win. Being losing with 4 outs to go to taking a 2-run lead on a 3-run homer like that, and then you have 3 outs to go, and they couldn't get those 3 outs, which is why Mazeroski had to hit the home run inning. Now, people think Mazeroski's was the biggest, but Mazeroski doesn't happen without Hal Smith hitting the 3-run homer off Jim Coates.
And Hal Smith doesn't. Jim Coates covers first on Clementi's ground ball to first, and
right. Although I've seen that play, and I feel like Coates got a bad rap because it was just a Bermuda Triangle no man's land. Coates for years, got crushed for that. And I'm like, he ran hard to the base, but he was running against Clementi, who's faster, and the ball was just kind of a dribbler where no one could get it. So, I know Coates gets negged for that. And I love, it's in the book. Ralph Terry gives up the home run there to lose the game to Mazeroski. But incredibly, 2 years later, he has the same chance, and he pitches all 9 innings and gets Willie McCovey to line out to Bobby Richardson to end it, when a home run would have ended it, and Terry could have conceivably, very easily, given up 2 Game 7 ending home runs, which has never been done by anybody else. Joe Carter was Game 6. So Ralph Terry was great in the book, and I just love that historical tidbit about him.
To go a little further down the dark side, Tyler, who would you want to interview who is no longer alive? Like who's fascinating enough for you to think, oh, boy, this is...
Well, I mean, there's so many. If you want to go way, way back to Satchel Paige and Christy Mathewson and guys from way back. I mean, Satchel Paige would be incredible. Just pitching as long as he did in the Negro Leagues and the Major Leagues, the World Series even. He would probably be number one. I did talk to and get to know Tug McGraw a little bit, but I miss him, and I wish he was still around to talk to, because he was just so much fun, just fascinating, and such a fun-loving, energetic guy. But I did get to know him a little bit, so I was lucky in that regard. But the first masters of it really, I think guys like Walter Johnson being so much faster than anybody else. Probably the greatest pitcher of all time, and Mathewson just being such a brainy kind of intellectual out there. I think those two would be dreams to get.
Mine would be Rube Waddell.
He was kind of crazy, huh? He was chasing after fire trucks in the middle of the game. I want to see if all that was true. Yeah, Kurt Wessel says Grover Cleveland Alexander. I would say that he'd be a pretty good one too. That's how I knew of Grover Cleveland, by the way, Kendall. Before I knew him as a president, I knew him as the first two names of the first great Phillies pitcher. So,
well, it's a better president it was a better pitcher than a president for sure.
He spoke at my dad's junior high school sports banquet.
Really?
Yeah. And he said he died like 5 months later. He was living in Springfield, Illinois, in a boarding house, and was just a shell of himself. And he said he got up in front of everybody and said, "If you're going to be a pitcher, 2 out of the first 3 pitches must be strikes, and don't drink. Look what it did to me."
Wow.
And he said,
wow. He might have won 400 games if he hadn't drank so much. Yeah, he was. It is amazing to think about.
I mean, the war. He was really destroyed by the. He had shell shock from the war. He was over in France, and I think that led.
Yeah.
Who's that? Mathewson?
Yeah. No. Grover
Alexander.
Okay. Because Mathewson got gassed in World War I. That's how he died, which is really sad.
Gassed, but I think Grover Cleveland was shelled, and I think
I didn't know that.
And that really bothered him. But plus the fact that he has the 3 greatest years in succession of any pitcher in the world, and he was in Baker Bowl, and everybody talks about how Baker Bowl was. They kept Chuck Klein out of the Hall of Fame for 20 years because he played in Baker Bowl, and mentions that Alexander's great 30-win seasons and 16 shutouts and all that stuff were in Baker Bowl.
That's a great point. It reminds me of the Phillies building a pretty small ballpark at Citizens Bank. And it's like, oh, there's too many home runs. It's the bandbox. And then they go and they get Halladay and Lee and Hamels and Oswald and Moyer and all that. And it's like, okay, if you're a great pitcher, you can handle Citizens Bank Park. You can, Trevor Bauer did pretty well last year in Cincinnati, that little ballpark in Cincinnati too. So, it doesn't have to be a big park to succeed.
The Phillies did move the fence back 5 feet after the first or second year, though, to get pitchers to come.
Did they? Where in the field did they do that? I don't remember that.
Left field,
the power boxes.
Left field, the foul pole is 329, and the fence started there, and now it angles back to the 334 sign.
Yeah,
and then everything is like 5 feet further deep until you get to the cutout center field where it's back to normal.
Huh. I didn't realize that.
They took out seats.
Okay, and they put in the flower box. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
no, well, no, they actually removed like 4 rows of seats or 5 rows of seats.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what they said. That was a flower box home run. That's a that's a Citizens special.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm gonna throw in the title of the book, and I can't remember, Tyler, because I can't remember a damn thing anymore, whether we read this together. But to me, it's the best baseball novel that I've ever read, and I taught it many times. It's called The Celebrant.
Celebrant, right?
And it's by a guy named Rolf Greenberg. And the great thing about it is it's definitely historical fiction, and the major character is Christy Mathewson. But it's told from the point of view, it's really cool, of the designer of the first World Series ring, who views Christy Mathewson as really his hero. So it's wonderful in just learning about Christy Mathewson.
Such a great book. It's so great. I remember that very well.
Yeah. And so anyway, that's just one for all of you to check out. The Celebrant by Rolf Greenberg, and I know it's still in print. Okay. Well, we're reaching about 15 minutes till the end. So I'm wondering if there are some burning questions from the rest of you. I got through many of them. By the way, Quinn, you wrote some good questions. I just remembered that, you know, the mind works slowly. I can't remember who sends questions. But anyway, how about the rest of you? Do you have some questions? Otherwise, I have more that have been sent in.
I have a question for Tyler.
Sure.
This is John Allenson. And I'm worried about the state of the game. You talked about that a little bit, but I'm worried about the game because I think it's a perfect game, and now I think they're messing with it. And part of it is the quality of the pitching. I think the pitching now is too good. There's not enough hitting, and they're you know, without the umpires now, I think we're going to robotic umpires shortly. I'd love to hear your impression of that. And you know, starting out extra inning games with guys on second, I think they're tinkering with it to try to speed it up. And I get that, but I think they're going to my fear is that they'll ultimately hurt the game. What do you think?
Yeah, well, my dad, who's on this call, actually likes the guys, the runner on second in extra innings, which shocked me. But so I guess you can be a purist and still like that rule. I think it's kind of cheap. I mean, I think, you know, I was talking with actually Roger Angel the other day, who's 100 years old, the greatest baseball writer ever, probably, or most greatest baseball essayist ever. Jason Stark's the greatest baseball writer ever. But Roger was saying how just he hates it because you need to, in baseball, you need to earn everything. Like I mentioned earlier, like everything is accounted for. Everything evens up on the bottom of the ledger. And you can't just put a guy on second base. How did he get there? He didn't, it drives me nuts. It's like the college football overtime thing where you just give them the ball in the 20 and then give the team the other ball. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't get crazy about it because I love baseball either way. And it does get the games over faster and it's instant action, but I don't like it. You know, so I don't mind the 7-inning doubleheaders because if a game gets rained out after 5, that counts as an official game. And I feel like 2 7-inning games in one day is a pretty cool amount of baseball. It's pretty good it's like having 2 sliders rather than 1 burger. You know, it's kind of like you get more, but they're both a little bit less. I don't mind that. I kind of find that fun. But baseball does feel like it's in behind the scenes. They feel like it's somewhat in crisis because of the lack of action on the field. It's not truly in crisis yet. I mean, it's still, you know, it still gets huge ratings in the local markets. Before the pandemic, it was still averaging 28,000 fans a game for 81 home games a year. I mean, no other sport can sustain that. Like baseball is still really, really popular, more popular than I think than people say when they answer those surveys that say football is their favorite sport. Yeah, football is your favorite sport. You only got to watch it 16 times a year, 17 times a year. Baseball's got 10 times as many games. Like there's so much more time given to baseball by fans than any other sport. So I still think baseball is very healthy, but to their credit, they're trying to be creative in getting ahead of this problem or trying to stay ahead of this problem because they feel like it's getting away from them too fast. Like the strikeouts have started piling up so fast that it now feels like the problem is kind of getting away. And Theo Epstein is in the commissioner's office now during his sort of sabbatical from running teams and winning World Series. And I think that's great because Theo's a very smart guy. Raul Ibanez, former Philly, another guy I covered, really smart guy. And I think with people like, and Michael Hill, the former GM of the Marlins, a Harvard educated guy. So like, I feel like those 3 people are really, really smart and really, really care about the game and its direction. So I'm comfortable that they're going to do this right in all the experiments they're doing in the minor leagues. Selling it at the big league level through the union, that might be tough. But I kind of think that we've reached a point where, yeah, we've just got to put more balls in play. I mean, a couple of years ago, I remember doing a story about how, oh my gosh, there's going to be more strikeouts than hits for the first time ever. And now that's like a given. Yeah. Now that's a given. They're hundreds and hundreds, maybe even 1,000 or more strikeouts than hits. And it just happens so fast. So that worries baseball a lot, that their product's going to be too slow. But last thing I'll say on this, another thing you find when you look at baseball historically is that fans have always worried, that baseball is too slow for the modern fast-paced society. That's always been a worry. So now you can say it's faster paced because we got the smart, the iPhones and everything's instantaneous. But this same concern has worried people every generation of baseball.
So I wonder, Kendall, if you look at this from a historical standpoint and go back to 1968 and were to research what went into the decision to lower the mound after, there were all-time low batting averages. I wonder what that historical view would say about what's happening today.
Well, yeah, we're seeing new historical lows, right? I mean, like it's the lowest batting average. I think batters are hitting 236 this year, I think, and that's the lowest ever. That's lower than 68. Really? They're striking out more than ever, and the
Mariners, I think, are 199.
The Mariners are right. The Mariners, I put on Twitter today, the Mariners, if you were to put Mario Mendoza of the Mendoza line on their team, the batting average would improve. That's how bad.
That was a great tweet, by the way.
So there's precedent for a radical. To me, that seemed like a radical change to lower the mound.
Right. Well, now they're talking about moving the mound back. I was on the Zoom with Joe Girardi the other day, and talking about hit by pitches being at an all-time high, because these kids come up and they throw so hard they don't know where it's going, and batters lean over. And Girardi's talking about how worried he is and how for the first time he's kind of in favor of moving the mound back, or at least he's open to the idea, because maybe it would help things out. Maybe it would keep guys from getting hit as much or hit with velocity as much. It seems super radical to me, but it's happening this year in the Independent League in the second half. So,
well, didn't they raise the mound? I mean, I can't even remember how long ago that was.
Well, they lowered it in '69 after Gibson had the great year and McLean and all those guys. They lowered it from 15 to 10.
Lowered it, right? Okay.
Yeah. Weren't we just worried about too many home runs last season, and now there's too many strikeouts?
Well, they still had too many home runs, but too many home runs. Home runs are still pretty high. That's why they tried to deaden the ball a little bit. Right. But guys are still hitting a lot of home runs because
that's all they're hitting.
Right. I mean, and you understand why, though, in a sense that, like, if it's so hard to hit, it's so hard to get hits, how do you score runs? Is it easier to hope that a guy makes a mistake and you sell out for it and hit it in the seats where no fielders are shifted and can't get it? Or should you try to get 3 singles? Or a single and a stolen base where you might get thrown out and then another single. It's harder to score with a bunch of singles, the guys say. And that's what the analytics people have come to promote. And it's kind of hard sometimes to bet against that, because if you run into one, you might hit 30 homers. Now, I don't like players who do just that, like the Rugnet Odor kind of guys, like who just hit 200 and they hit 30 home runs and strike out 180 times. That's not an appealing player to me. But if he gets on base enough and he hits 30 home runs, they don't really care if he hits 210.
But Tyler, if you're then in a position where you are dealing with changes to the game, whether you're lowering the mound or you're moving the mound back, I'm not worried about the history of the game because they're worried about the financial end of it. What is your feeling then, because you're a purist about a lot of these things? There's talk of legislation of you can't have a shift, you can't play to tendencies. Isn't that what baseball is all about? Bryce Harper could get on base a lot if he's willing to push the ball down the line. And I know he's paid an exorbitant amount of money to hit runs and knock runs in with the long ball. But all he's got to do is keep a couple of third basemen honest by pushing the ball down the third baseline a couple of times. His batting average goes up and they got to play more honestly against him. What are your feelings there?
Yeah, people say that all the time. And I think a lot of hitters.
Tyler, you got 27 outs to get as many runs across as you can.
Mm-hmm. I kind of feel like I'm over the shift. I'm kind of tired of it. I get that it's cool to do it occasionally for Ted Williams or David Ortiz or somebody. But it's so constant You know, guys checking their cards and in their back pocket and with 2 strikes shifting around, and they're taking out the ground ball as a viable way to get on base. If you were to say that you have to have 2 infielders on either side of second base, I think I wouldn't have a problem with that. I just feel like it's unnatural to look around and see one guy on the third base side. You know, hitters clearly are not doing what you say is that, you know, just bunting to keep them honest. Like sometimes they do, but usually they don't. Either they're not comfortable with it. They feel like it takes them out of their game competitively. They don't want to give in. And that competitiveness is part of what makes them great. You know, all that stuff. They're not doing it. They're not doing the bunting. They're not going the opposite way, or else they would have done it by now. I don't know. I want to see more hits. I want to see more action. I love strikeouts, but I like strikeouts on TV. At the ballpark, strikeouts are rough because you can't really see the break and the moat and all that stuff. You just see someone swinging and missing or someone getting rung up. So they've got to. I think they're good to be that they're thinking of this stuff, but thinking about it and getting it through the union is a big hurdle. Because the union's members are generally really conservative and don't really want to change things the way they are. It takes a long time to get sides to agree to anything.
My dad said if Mantle would go 0 for 5 or 0 for 6 in a couple of games, he would bunt all the time.
He did bunt a lot. Right. That's what's amazing.
Bunt. If he was 0 for 6, he'd say baloney. He said 0 for 7, and he would lead off an inning, and he would bunt for a hit, and there wasn't a play on him because they would play so deep, and he was so fast. I mean, he just. But I bet you he had 12 bunts a year for base hits.
Yep. And Mike Schmidt, before I interviewed him for the World Series book, I went back and watched all of his at bats in the 2 World Series he was in, and in '80. He bunted in game 3 in Kansas City and in game 4 in Kansas City. So in game 5, when he came up in a big spot, George Brett is playing in the guard against the bunt, and Schmidt hits a smash down the third base line that if Brett was not guarding against the bunt would have been an easy 5-3. But because Schmidt put that thought of the bunt in George Brett's mind, Schmidt got a base hit off of it. And it was a huge hit. It started the big rally off Quisenberry. They went up 3-2. They won the next game with the vet. So Schmitty being a smart, like Mickey Mantle, all-around player, willing to bunt in the right situation, got him. It paid off later when he didn't bunt. It's like in the book I write about Mariano's cutter. Everyone says he threw only 1 pitch. Mariano Rivera got the last out of game 4 of the Mets World Series. Sorry, Doc and Pagey. By striking
unnecessary, but go ahead.
By striking out Matt Franco, only World Series at bat Matt Franco ever had. He took strike 3 looking because it was a straight fastball, a straight 4-seamer on the outside black. And the reason he could throw that was because his cutter was so good that Franco was way off the plate. Because Franco's like, I got to stand off the plate because if I'm on it, I got no chance of hitting that cutter. He's going to come in on me. And I'm selling out. I'm saying basically, I'm only going to hit the cutter because if he throws that fastball on the outside part of the plate, I can't reach it. My only hope is that he can call it a ball. And so Mo won that game with his cutter without using his cutter. Yeah. So the ability to think and do different things, even when you're great at one thing, you know, it's part of what makes baseball so fun. And that's one of the things that I feel like baseball is missing now is multiple ways to win. You know, when I was growing up in the 80s, first World Series I ever watched, 82, it was one team that was all speed. That was the Cardinals. They didn't hit any home runs at all. And one team that was all power, the Brewers, and they didn't really run at all. So it was this contrast of which style is going to win. And I went down to the end of game 7, St. Louis. But like, you're not going to see a whole lot of teams except for Tampa Bay, which does everything differently. Most teams are kind of go about it the same way. And that makes it less interesting to me. I still love it, but it's still less interesting than it used to be.
Yeah.
Doc, we have time for about 2 questions.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. So ask away. Got 2 minutes.
Looks like Mr. Kepner.
Tyler.
Okay.
Oh, you have access to me 24/7.
You have a lot of stories in your book, and they're all enjoyable. But which one is your favorite that you've uncovered?
Well, I don't know, probably getting Carl Erskine to talk about Three Finger Brown. That was just so cool, because Three Finger Brown might as well be Abraham Lincoln. It's so old, such an old name, such a figure from the far away past, that to talk to someone living who could tell you about meeting Three Finger Brown and him showing his gnarled fingers and talking about how it helped his curveball to not have an index finger, so it doesn't get in the way when you pull down on, or to not have not have an index finger. That was just really cool to hear someone still living, talking about Three Finger Brown. It's kind of like Rob, Jr. there to tell the story about Grover Cleveland Alexander. It's like, you might as well be talking about Grover Cleveland. Like, it's just so long ago, but you're only one removed from somebody like that. So that's the first one that comes to mind. But I can, one of the great things about writing the book was after it came out, or after I got the first copy of it, occasionally I would just like open to a random page and, remember everything about how I got that information. Like, here's a page 145. Okay. I talked to John Burkett and Ken Hill about the splitter, and I talked to them. I remember that I happened to be at the Rangers game when they were having the 20th anniversary of their 1996 championship team. And I'm like, well, Burkett and Hill both threw great splitters. Let me talk to them. And so I went over there in like the party suite with the Rangers and just, got that from them. Then there's Chuck Finley, who I covered and who was a blast to cover. And he sent me emails, and he put an exclamation point on every answer for some reason, which I thought was really funny. Reading that in like Chuck Finley giving an exclamation point on every answer. And then Schilling, who is obviously, he's a little bit different these days. But when Schilling was still around baseball, and you could just talk to him, he's just a brilliant baseball mind. Being able to talk to him about the splitter. So like, there's one random page that I can just remember how I got the info and what the conversation was like. And that's been one of the most rewarding things really about writing a book, is just, knowing how you got everything and how it felt as you got it and what you had to do to get it, like, not that everything was like a big deal, how to get someone, but just like thinking on your feet, like, oh, the 96 Rangers are having a reunion. Wonder if I can go over to the suite and talk to two of the guys, and just that sort of thing. Like, that's what I really love about the experience of having written a book.
Well, I think we've come to an end. I want to thank everybody for being part of this group. It's been crazy fun. And Tyler, a special thanks to you for taking the time this whole night with us.
Well, thank you guys, and thanks for the nice introduction and all the nice words. I wouldn't, I'm pretty safe to say I wouldn't have been doing exactly what I'm doing, or the career wouldn't have gone the way it has without having gone to GA and having so many great teachers. And I mean that. That's the best thing about GA. And there's a lot of great things about GA, but the faculty that I had, the fact that it was cool to be smart, and it challenged you intellectually, and importantly, it made you organized in how you went about your work. I think that was one of the most important things that Zach has found as well in this industry, is just knowing how to organize your thoughts and your time. And that's some of the subtle things that you learn from the teachers and from the way that GA kind of values excellence. So anyway, all that rubbed off on me quite a bit. And so anything GA wants me to do, I always do it. Particularly you two guys, because you two guys are very special people to me.
Thank you. Kendall, you want to throw in a last word here, buddy?
It's been a pleasure. It hurts to say this a little bit, but it's been a pleasure to share some time with you, Doc. I continue to forgive you for your blindsidedness in baseball fandom.
I understand.
But, we have put up with each other for many, many years. Too many to name right now.
We've attended so many games together.
We did.
All of which I might add to the audience here. Kendall and I would always go to Mets games and Phillies games at Citizens Bank Park. He at one point, I mean, it was a little immaturity. He started to refuse to go to the games because every time we went to a Mets Phillies games, the Mets won.
I didn't win one game with this loser.
Yeah, they love that David Wright era Mets team. They love Citizens Bank Park.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It was like they got there and they just, and the ball was like a beach ball, like they say. And it was just uncanny that those guys would come in. I mean, not 07, 08, but most of the time, it felt like the Mets would just hit 5 home runs a game.
And they brought their darn fans with them, and it made it worse.
And the "Let's Go Mets" cheer is worse than the tomahawk chop.
Let's Go Mets is the original cheer. The tomahawk chop came afterwards. In 1962, we were saying "Let's Go Mets" at the Polo Grounds.
One of my favorite moments as a fan, the Phillies made a World Series in '83 when I was 8. And then for the most part, they were bad until I was 18 in '93. So a lot of lean years. But in '86, the Mets had a chance they were running away with it. But the Phillies were in second. And you knew the Mets had to clinch somewhere. And they came down to the vet. And any one of 3 wins that weekend would have clinched.
I remember that.
And the Phillies swept them. And I went to the Friday night game, and Mike, it was exciting atmosphere. All the New York fans had come down, sitting in the cheap seats in the 700 level. They were furious. Schmidt hit a home run off Dwight Gooden to left center. It was like tied him with Lou Gehrig on the all-time list or something. And I think the next couple of days, Kevin Gross won and Bruce Ruffin won or something. It was just like, all right, Philly pride. That was like the most Philly pride weekend for me, because it was like, you know what, you may be going to the World Series, you may be the best team in baseball, but you ain't going to clinch on our AstroTurf. So that was a great weekend. Probably besides Schmidt's 500th home run the next year in Pittsburgh, that was the best moment, I think, for the Phillies between the '83 LCS and the '93 season.
Of course, I remember. I believe they won 108 games, the Mets, that year.
Yeah.
Okay. And
then eight more in the playoffs.
So, anyways,
we're up 1-0 tonight, Doc.
Thank you.
No, I'm on tape. I got to watch it.
Okay. Listen,
So,
what a pleasure it's been. What a pleasure it's been. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank
see
you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
A lot
you.
of fun.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Big meeting.
See you, big guy.
Yeah, Peter. Wetzley, are you still there?
I am.
He never leaves.
Go away, Wetzel. We have to have
Peter,
a confab
Peter,
here.
my brother and I were just talking smack about you while you were on mute. So
I'm sure he will. I would expect nothing less.
he actually needs to reach out now that things are opening up. He's going to be he's going to be reaching out to Peter and to Heather and to Kendall. My sympathies to you all. I know that Jim was a close friend and a confidant of yours, and a person who meant a lot to you guys. And it's just a tough time and a tough situation, this year, let alone adding this on top of it.
Yeah.
I talked to Kendall, I talked to Timmy today, and I mean, the guy's had a bad week, between some of the challenges that the boys have put him under this week, and the fact that this has come up in the middle of the week. It's just been a tough year. And so I, on behalf of everybody in this group, would like to thank both of you. It has been a pleasure not only to get abused by Doc on a regular basis, but to hear
I might say
the erudite intellectual stimulation that you guys provide, and the challenges that you offer to all of us former students, and much lesser colleagues, is why we all come back here for this. I just sent a text to Kendall saying, I miss guys like you who would take the challenges and go, what can you learn from this? And you're the reason that I do a lot of the things that I do. You're the reason that I'm here. And you're the reason that I still coach baseball. You're the reason that I still coach soccer. You're the reason that I still work with the little kids at GA. So I can't thank you both enough for all of the things that you have done, not only for me, but for all of your students. And Peter, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that Henry James is the worst goddamn book I ever was forced to read. And I still hold you accountable for that.
But I'll tell you one thing, that wasn't my choice. That was in 10th grade. I remember that. I hated that book too. I just had to fake liking the goddamn thing. I don't know who the hell chose that. It was probably Honeycutt or somebody.
Ralph Allen, maybe?
No, it wasn't Ralph.
Yeah.
No, it was somebody I didn't like so much.
Because Ralph would,
There were people you didn't like, Doc? Really?
He doesn't like most people.
You know as well as I do that Doc let them all know it too. This is why I have got the reputation that I've got at GA.
And I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you for having that.
There's no one more crusty than Doc.
Thank you.
Just
Thank
saying.
you. All righty, guys. I got to go and feed the dog.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Until next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt.
Take care.
See you guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you, guys.